Hello, my name is Sandy Stosz. I came into the Coast Guard Academy in 1978 as a cadet and retired 40 years later as a Vice Admiral in 2018. And the vignette I'm going to share today isn't a story, it's an experience of my journey from cadet to admiral. And the thread that ties across that 40-year journey is leadership that I learned through seamanship starting at the Coast Guard Academy. When I came into the academy, I'd never sailed. And the first thing they did for us swabs or first-year cadets was throw us in sailboats, the dinghies. And they set us out to sea to learn how to sail. And most of us didn't know how to sail. And I was one of them. I'd always wanted to sail. It was a mystery to me. I'd always thought it was going to be so fun to sail because you'd see beautiful sailboats effortlessly going along the rivers and the ocean. Not for me. When I got in that sailboat, I couldn't get that boat to move. I was stuck in irons with the sails just flapping and the little boom hitting my head, and I either spent my time in irons or turned upside down, flipping the boat. And I couldn't control that boat, I couldn't control the wind, and it was very frustrating. But there came a time, after a few times on the water, of frustration where I pulled the line and angled the tiller just right to capture wind in that sail. And once I got the wind in the sail, the boat started to move. And it might sound like the simplest of things, but feeling the power of the wind in my sail and being able to harness that power and then use that power to steer my boat, it became a metaphor for my entire life. So leadership through seamanship starts with learning to lead yourself. And you've got to understand yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses. You've got to learn how to fail, even in small ways, like failing to know how to sail, and then learning how to harness the power of that wind, and then being able to steer your boat. And I went from the academy to my first ship, the Coast Guard cutter Glacier, an icebreaker. I became a career cutterman for 12 years at sea, and I commanded 2 boats. And all throughout that time as a cutterman, I thought back to when I learned how to harness the power of the wind. And I was in irons, and I was, without a course and steerage way a lot of times in my career when I faced new and challenging circumstances. The seas were high, the tempests were coming, and my sails were flapping. And I always would go back to learning how to grab that wind and tune my sheet and tune my tiller just right to capture that wind. So the lesson that I learned from learning how to lead through sailing at sea, learning how to be a leader and a seaman, was that you have that thread of always coming back to learning how to harness the power of that wind. Because you're going to find yourselves all throughout your career in new circumstances where you struggle and you fail, but all you need to do is keep on trying until you can finally harness the power of that wind in your sails. So I came, after being a cutterman for my whole career, about 30 years after I graduated, I returned to the academy as superintendent. And I found that cadets were still learning to lead through seamanship. And the experience that I always thought was the foundational leadership development experience at the Coast Guard Academy when I was superintendent was the Leadership 44 Sail Training Program. And we had also started up an Institute for Leadership, the Institute for Leadership, that is the force behind the Cadet Leader Development Program. And the Coast Guard Academy's mission is all about developing leaders of character. And we do it through experience at sea on a sailboat. So the Leadership 44 program is these 44-foot coastal sail training vessels. They deploy with cadets in the summertime on a 2-week voyage around New England. And cadets learn about themselves and about how to work as a team. So they learn that leadership right there on the water. And they have to get to know each other, to work together. And I always remember when I first came back as superintendent, we had just launched these new Leadership 44 sailboats that were provided by the Coast Guard Academy Alumni Association through donors. And I asked the director of the waterfront one day, I said to him, "Alan, how's it going with the Leadership 44 program with the cadets out there?" And he said, "Oh, it's okay, ma'am, it's going fine." And he just hesitated enough to where I knew I had to follow up. So I said, "Alan, tell me what's really going on. How is this, what's going on that you're not telling me?" He says, "Well, ma'am," he said, The cadets were over on Martha's Vineyard. They were getting ready to get the boat underway for the next day of the leg of their journey. And the cadet responsible for the logistics, filling up the fuel in the water tanks, grabbed the hose and put it in the tank and filled it right up. But it was a water hose filling up a diesel tank. So that boat wasn't going anywhere that day. And I'm like, I just laughed, and I think that the director of the waterfront thought I'd be angry, but no. The reason there's so much power in cadets learning how to lead through sailing and seamanship is that you can make mistakes in a safe environment. We send the cadets out on these Leadership 44 boats to learn, to make mistakes, to fail in small ways. They'll never do that again. In fact, they're still telling that story 10 years later. No cadet's ever going to fill the wrong tank up again. So it's a great way to learn how to lead. And when I retired in 2018, I came back immediately as chair of the Coast Guard Academy Sailing Council to continue that thread from cadet to cutterman to admiral to chair of the Sailing Council, because I believe so strongly in the power of leader development and the Coast Guard Academy's mission to develop leaders of character in service to our great nation. Thank you.